Welcome to the breakdown on Latte Firm. Stories of Sheffield United and England goalkeeper Aaron Ramsdale moving to Arsenal just aren't going away. What is it that makes this goalkeeper so special? I'm joined by goalkeeping analyst John Harrison. Hi, John. Welcome to the Latte Firm. How are you?
Hey, no, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you on. There's been a lot of stories recently linking Sheffield United and England goalkeeper Aaron Ramsdale to Arsenal. As a long-standing Arsenal fan and as someone who watched David Seaman growing up, I just can't quite get my head around this transfer. And there's a lot of money being talked about as well. So I'm really pleased to have you on. But just before we dive into looking at Aaron Ramsdale and his style of play, do you want to just give the viewers an overview as to who you are and how you got involved in doing goalkeeping analytical work?
As a kid, I always played football. I played in goal. I always really enjoyed it. And my other passion in my life was actually science and physics in particular and astronomy. So I followed that passion right through to doing a PhD at Cambridge in astronomy. So that took up most of my life up until the last year. And basically during the 2018 World Cup, I thought, I don't know if I love astronomy and doing a PhD in astronomy because I love the research or I actually care about the stars and the things I was working on. And I sort of was like, if I could research football, would that be the perfect sort of job and opportunity for me? So for the 2018 World Cup, I just tried doing my own data research to see if I enjoyed it. And I really did. And I published it on Twitter. And then, the people at GK Intelligence really liked that and got me to write some articles for them. And then I've been doing various other bits and bobs for various people.
Good. Well, let's get stuck into Aaron Ramsdale. The stories just won't go away. I have to admit that I haven't watched him, sort of on a weekly basis, but for the life of me, I just can't see what the attraction is with the boy. He just doesn't strike me as someone who has an aura of being a great goalkeeper. But what do you think it is at a high level that makes him so appealing to a club like Arsenal Football Club?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that he's English, so it'll be one of the quota. Like, as weird as that is, often for goalkeepers in other positions, it's nice to just get one person to tick off your homegrown quota. And he's young as well, which means you can sign him on a 4 or 5 year deal and he'll be fine for that duration. And I guess he's just we'll get into it later, but he's like a decent level Premier League goalkeeper. For me, I feel Arsenal must be signing him as a number 2. Like, if this was their sort of number 1 to replace Leno, I'd be very much like you. I don't really know why they're doing that. But if they want a number 2 who can sit there, take up one of their places and also be good enough for the cup competitions, I certainly think he can be that, because he's much better than Renarsson or people that Arsenal have had in the past as their goalkeeper. And Leno basically played almost every game last year because they couldn't trust their number 2 except for the period he was injured, and they got Matty Ryan in. So I think it is a problem for Arsenal that they haven't been able to trust their number 2 goalkeeper.
Well, let's take a look at his profile now, John. So on your screen, you should be able to see some basic information about the boy sort of popping up in that left-hand side box. We know he's a goalkeeper. We know he's 23, so he's certainly got time on his side. England international, which you've just mentioned, obviously that helps our homegrown quota. He's not gigantic in terms of goalkeeper. I think he comes in at just shy of 6'2", predominantly right-footed. Now, you talk about him potentially being a number 2 for Arsenal, but he's played all 38 games for Sheffield United in the Premier League last season. And it was very easy for me to just sort of put in goals conceded, but I think that's probably a bit unfair given the fortune of the team last year. But he's kept 5 clean sheets of those 38. He made 2 errors leading to goals in the Premier League. And a couple of things which we'll probably touch upon at some point, but he makes sort of 26, 27 passes per game and about or just shy of 8 long, accurate passes per game. He's got a long-term contract at Sheffield United, so there's no real pressure on them to sell, which is probably why they're playing hardball with a potential fee. Do you think a player who's been a regular number 1 at Sheffield United all throughout the season would want to come and be number 2 at Arsenal Football Club?
Yeah, I think this is a weird one, especially because I think Sheffield is one of sort of Ramsdale's. It's not his boyhood club, but it's sort of one he's been at before and clearly has an affection for. But I think it's one of those things. Sheffield United playing in a Championship versus being a number 2 for Premier League, Premier League, but also Arsenal, who will want to be challenging for Champions League, Europa League at least next year. So I think it would be a big step for him, and maybe often you see goalkeepers do this. And also being number 2 for Arsenal, if they stay in the cup competitions a while, that can actually be 15 games a season. So it's not the same as being if you was number 2 for Sheffield United, where you probably play every game except maybe FA Cup. It's a bit of a different ball game. So I think I can see the appeal. But yeah, it's always going to be a tricky one, and you're going to have to convince him that he will get some game time, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose the biggest problem for us, or the biggest challenge for us, is that we're not in Europe this season. So it's going to be that 38 Premier League game season plus the 2 cups that you sort of mentioned. Let's move on to your first sort of chart. And this is obviously courtesy of you and your data. So shot stopping performance, this chart that's just appeared on the slide. What are we looking at here? Can you just talk us through that?
So what my model basically does is, for the shot stopping element, it takes all the positions of the shots the goalkeeper faced. So that's got positions in, so I don't know, 10 yards out on an angle, 20 yards out straight down the middle, that sort of thing. And it takes into account basically the power of the shot. So was it 70 miles an hour, or was it 15 miles an hour scuffed along the floor? And it takes into account where it went in the goal. So did it go straight down the middle? Did it go just to the right? Did it go right in the far corner? Was it in the top corner? All that sort of stuff. And it basically uses that to spit out a probability that an average Premier League goalkeeper saves it. So the example I like to give, if you're a 30-yard strike straight down the middle at 40 miles an hour, that'll be 99% of the time that's getting saved by a Premier League goalkeeper. There'll be the tiny amount where it creeps through their legs and goes in, but the majority of the time that's an easy save. Whereas from 15 yards, if a shot's volleyed into the top corner, that might be a 5% save probability, because very rarely is a keeper going to manage to tip that over the bar or get close to that shot. So basically, you can aggregate all those up over a season and have a look at how they're doing shot stopping wise relative to the sort of Premier League average.
Understood. I'm fascinated already, because there's obviously a science behind it. So in terms of his shot stopping performance, this chart, this is obviously showing his performance across the Premier League season as it's kind of unfolded. Talk us through the movement in the chart, in the data.
Yeah, so he started off actually pretty okay. So the green parts are basically where he's saving more goals than you would expect, given those 1v1s, handling and shot stopping. He's actually doing better than that hypothetical average. I could show you this for I don't know, Alisson or someone like that, and it'd be all green the whole time. Or I could show you it for some weaker goalkeeper, and it might be all red the whole time, because they're quite good at consistently showing either they're poor or they're good. And interestingly, Ramsdale started off pretty solid with a lot of green, some good performances. But Sheffield United weren't really picking up results. They lost their first 5, 6, 7 games, or didn't win at least in their first 15. And you can see there's this fun moment here just after the Chelsea game, which we'll break down some of the saves and moments in, that he basically made a few big mistakes, and I think they ended up losing 4-1 or 5-1 to Chelsea away. And suddenly the media were on his back, and actually it wasn't really fair. I don't think he had played well up until that game, but because they hadn't won any games, and the fact he's a young English keeper, I think a lot of people pointed the finger and said, well, when Dean Henderson was there, they were winning every week, forgetting the fact the 2 centre-backs were injured this whole time. Yeah. And actually, it wasn't really down to Ramsdale. He did have one bad game there, and the media did seem to suggest, he must have been bad the whole time. But actually, he was pretty solid for the first sort of quarter of the season. But interestingly, once the media did get on his back, he then strung 3 or 4 really bad performances together in a row, and he ended up having this really, really kind of tough patch in the middle of the season. But I think what's kind of amazing was I expected, so I think I did a tweet about this about halfway through the season, wow, it's going to be hard for Ramsdale to recover his form now, because Sheffield United are in a massive relegation battle, probably going to be relegated soon. And the media are killing him, saying they're going down because of him, because he's not Henderson. But actually, amazingly, I think it showed really good mental strength from Ramsdale, because he actually turned this around, and his back end of the season was really, really good. He was putting up some great numbers and keeping clean sheets and playing really well for Sheffield United. So I think it's one of those that it shows in one regard that he can have big dips in form and big spikes in form, which maybe isn't the best thing you want for a number 2. You probably want them to be more steady. But I think it does show a level of mental resilience, because he went for a big money move effectively to Sheffield United and then had a really bad period, and he didn't crumble. He managed to bounce back at the end.
Is he sort of brave as a goalkeeper? Is he quite outspoken, quite loud, quite vocal?
Yeah, no, I think I would definitely agree with that. 2 sort of moments came to my mind straight away, and that's one of them was going to AFC Wimbledon, who just got promoted to League One at the time and were trying to battle to stay in League One. This is when he's even younger, maybe 3 years ago now. So yeah, 20-year-old lad, 19, 20-year-old lad goes to AFC Wimbledon, and he was basically their player of the season in the last half when he went there on loan and kept them up. And I think that shows great mental resilience, going on loan to a League One side and pulling in performances like that. And I actually live in Wimbledon at the moment, and basically he's like a local hero around here for that season. So I think that's one thing that came to my mind. And the second is with Bournemouth last year, 2 years ago now. I remember he got injured for one game, and then there was the clips of him in the crowd there cheering on the other goalkeeper who was then in goal because he was injured, and just being generally part of it. And I think, I don't know, those sort of things tell you something about a player's character. So I think he is definitely, the sort of character you'd want in a dressing room.
I want to move now on to some of your sort of save and shot and spread selections. And I want you to talk us through this because this is really interesting. So the first one, and for the viewers watching, obviously we're not allowed to use real footage because of copyright claims. So John has very neatly captured them in sort of photographic format. So the first one is a save that he made against Chelsea. Talk us through the sort of order and what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so I like to pick these out just because, one, you can see the goalkeeper's sort of set position and how they react to the ball. So sometimes with film you can see a wonderful save, but it's quite hard to break it down. So sometimes I actually find this is better. And here what I want to show is, so Ramsdale's skill strength, one of them is his sort of reflex shot stopping. And in fact, so I've broken it down. That previous graphic, obviously you can extract those green and red bits, add them together and figure out exactly how the goalkeeper did. So Ramsdale's sort of general shot stopping, he saved Sheffield United about a goal more than you would expect an average keeper. And the good of this, so the reason why it was a goal more was saves like this against Chelsea. So you can see in the first thing, I think Chilwell's volleying it from about just right at the penalty spot and hooks it right into the corner. And one thing I like here is Ramsdale, you can see he's got a pretty tidy set position in the first still. He's upright. He's not too much excess movement, and then he gets down low really well in the second, and he's wonderful execution of a negative step dive to push off and flick this round the corner.
The next one is a goal that he conceded against the enemy, but Harry Kane here. Talk us through what's going on here.
Yeah, so this is why his numbers aren't higher. So I think for Ramsdale's ability and skill set, he could be performing better than he did last season. And one of his big sort of issues is just getting out of position. So here you can see Harry Kane's about 23 yards out. Yeah, that arc's 22 yards. So he's just outside of that. And he's taking a shot from there. And Ramsdale stood outside his 6-yard box. He's about 6 and a bit yards off his line. So interestingly here, he's turned a shot from what is 22, 23 yards effectively into the same reaction time as a shot from 15, 16 yards. So he's turned that shot to a shot from inside the box effectively to him. And that means when Kane curls it, you can see in the third image that he's full stretch dive, the ball's already past him. Yeah. So it's one of those things. He needs to try and get back to maybe 2 yards off his line, which would allow him for that shot to take a step and then dive and get across. A simple lapse in concentration rather than him actively choosing to be there. He just didn't fully adjust his positioning. And this happens quite a few times with Ramsdale over the course of the season. And I think that's why his numbers aren't as high as they could be. With enough time to get a step in and a dive across, it's much more of a, good save, tipped it around the post versus, wow, he's never going to save it from the position he's in.
So that's obviously something that he can work on. The next one is a good parry against Brighton. Tell us what's happening here.
Yeah, so the reason I picked this out is we can talk about his handling and what that says in my model. So actually my model predicts he basically gave up about an extra goal's worth of parries compared to an average goalkeeper. But I found this quite weird after watching all the footage and looking at it. He's a really good manipulator of the ball. And this is just an example here. So you can see Mope strikes it in quite a really awkward area from the third still. It's not a full stretch dive. It's in this sort of awkward area where you really have to guide it. And you can see Ramsdale beautifully caresses the ball, twist of the palm style, and pushes it straight out the side of the 6-yard box. And I think it ends up going out for a throw-in rather than a corner. So that's the best parry you can possibly do. Deep throw-ins go in about 1% of the time versus corners, which are 3%, both which are far, far less than parrying it back into the box and having a rebound that's maybe a 20, 30, 40, 50% chance. So yeah, this was a wonderful parry, and he does this a lot. And I think he's really good at manipulating the ball. Interestingly, Martin Margetson, the England goalkeeper coach, I've been watching a lot of those videos because of the Euros. He always talks about parrying it on the sides of the 6-yard box, not the front. And watching Ramsdale, he does that so often. You can tell he's been coached by the England setup for a long time now. And the next slide is going to show us a bad parry against Arsenal. So here, this is a point I'd want to bring up. You can see that actually in the second, his set position's fine in the first graphic, and then in the second still, he actually moves his arms back behind his body. And this is a little quirk that Ramsdale does have and can often cause him issues. So it's an arm swing that you can see goalkeepers like Neuer, Kepa, Donnarumma does it a few times as well, that they do this. But you have to be really good if you're going to use this technique, because you need to time it well. If you can time it correctly to the strike, which here Ramsdale hasn't, because in an ideal world, as they're about to strike, you put your arms behind you, and then as they hit the ball, your arms come out in front. And it's a way of giving your arms extra momentum so you can go either side more freely than just having static hands. But the problem is, if you mistime it like Ramsdale does here, you can see the ball's travelled about 5 or 6 yards and his arms are still here, and he only gets them out in front by the time that he's also starting his dive. And what this means is when he goes into his dive, he doesn't actually really have control of his hands. He's still firing them forwards. Yeah. And that means he can't do what he did before, which means he just ends up hitting it straight out the front of the 6-yard box, like Martin Margetson said he shouldn't do. And he ends up giving, I think, is it Martinelli, an open goal to tap into, providing him with what would be like a huge, 60, 70% chance. So it's one of those things that I'd be worried with Ramsdale that his arm swing might hold him back, but it's one of those things. Top goalkeepers do it, not all of them, but top goalkeepers do it because they time it so well. So it's one of those things. If you can learn to time it well, he'll be fine. But at the moment, it is causing a few issues in his game because he's getting the timing a bit wrong.
Sure. The next one is not a save of any description, but it's actually your one-on-one sort of faced analysis. So talk us through this particular chart on screen now.
Yes, so one of the sort of biggest things I guess I've done, and I'm most well known for on Twitter anyway, is my 1v1 analysis. So I basically have a huge database of like 1,000 odd 1v1s now, and I basically analysed what the goalkeeper does and whether it results in a goal or a save or what happens. And the sort of interesting thing, I guess, that I found, and this is marked on this diagram with the lines that aren't pitch lines, so these sort of dotted arc and the two dotted lines stemming from the post. I basically found that if you're outside that dotted arc, the optimum strategy is actually to wait inside their 6-yard box. So the goalkeepers that wait inside their 6-yard box when the 1v1 starts out here do better at saving than goalkeepers that engage. And then if you're in between this sort of middle rung here, in between the posts and inside that arc, the best thing to do is rush out and spread. And that's what these starfish points are. So the spread style is what you see Neuer doing, Joe Hart doing, Kasper Schmeichel doing, with both legs out either side, both arms out either side. That's the sort of technique. It found that goalkeepers that use that technique in there are the most successful. And then on the two sort of wide flanks, it was more like the cricket-style long barrier block technique, which I guess you'll see De Gea doing a lot. Matty Ryan does it a lot. I think Leno does it a lot, actually, as well.
Yeah, he does.
Sort of go into the cricket-style long barrier, do that, and I found goalkeepers that did that in there were the most successful.
How does Aaron Ramsdale perform then in terms of that study?
Yeah, so basically, he comes out as your sort of quite traditional aggressive goalkeeper. So here you can see on the left, we've got long range 1v1s. So these are the ones that are, edge of the box sort of stuff when players are running through. My favorite example of a long range 1v1 ever is the Martinelli goal against Chelsea, because he's literally running from his own half, and Kepa basically, and according to my model, and I think most people would agree, gets it wrong. He rushes out to like the penalty spot and then just picks away and dives. So Martinelli ends up having a side foot finish from, I think, 20 yards. So he's outside the box in the little D, and Martinelli, just obviously a good player, just strokes it, rolls it in the corner, and easy goal. And it's one of those, you can imagine if Kepa stays in his 6-yard box there, Martinelli then is like, he can't really shoot from there unless it's a blaster. He's not going to score from there. He has to take another touch. And then it's one of those, if the touch is slightly heavy, then the keeper can engage and smother it and block the ball. It makes it much, much harder. So that's my favorite 1v1, because it just shows how if a goalkeeper makes a bad decision, it can turn a 20-yard strike into just a roll in the corner finish, which all the top players can do. If Kepa could have stayed calm and dictated the 1v1 to Martinelli, it would have been much more of a difficult finish. And I think my favourite thing here is just an interview with Gary Lineker, where he was saying, for him, goalkeepers that stayed deep during 1v1s up until a point made the finishes so hard. Strikers also realise that it's more difficult for them to score when the goalkeeper doesn't commit early.
Mate, this is fascinating. So just
Oh
to
yeah.
sort of close this slide on Ramsdale then. So, the overall performance and the close ranges, he's got plus points there. Just talk us through that.
He's absolutely phenomenal, and we'll go through the shots in a minute. But like, look at all those big white stars are basically saves. So you can see how close range some of these 1v1s are. The ball's just falling to people, and he's so good at flying off his line, making a big shape and just letting it hit him. So yeah, he's top notch. They saved Sheffield United about 4 goals above what you'd expect an average goalkeeper to save in those situations, which is incredible. But he does have a tendency, like we're talking about with Kepa and whatever, to rush out a little bit early. So these like triangles and diamonds up here are all times he's rushed out and tried to attack 1v1s, and he's just conceded every time. The white circles are where he waited deep. So this shows, this is a really good graphic for showing how waiting deep does work when 1v1s occur in these positions.
Yeah, and is this coachable? I mean, we talk about him being 23. So is this something that you can coach a goalkeeper, condition them into thinking and changing the way that they engage and they approach?
Yeah, I definitely think this is something that is coachable. Like when I've looked at and done analysis of older goalkeepers, they are often better at holding deep when they need to, rather than engaging. I guess that's a little bit of also they've slowed down, as in their speed, their quickness off the line isn't as fast, so they maybe realise and take into account more the fact that they need to stay deep. So I definitely think that's coachable. The one thing I'd say that's harder to coach is the different techniques, but Ramsdale has that. He's really good at using the block, the sort of cricket style long barrier, and he's really, really good at using the spread. So those are the square points and the star points. He's really proficient at those techniques, and that's way harder to teach. So I think definitely something just working on him staying deeper would be pretty easy to do and easy to coach. So he could be, he'd be outrageous at 1v1s. If he could get the long range number to be above average, he'd be seriously weirdly, for I guess a sort of middle of the range at the moment Premier League goalkeeper, he'd actually be sort of formidable 1v1's top 3 goalkeeper in the Premier League if he could turn those long range numbers around.
Gosh. If we may, let's move on to some of his spreads. So the first one that's come up is a spread against Liverpool. Talk us through what we can see here.
Yeah, no, this is textbook sort of Ramsdale, and it's one of those chances that without this decision you could easily see it being a goal. So yeah, the ball comes across to Curtis Jones in that first still, and I think it bounces off his thigh. He tries to cushion it on his thigh and falls there, and you can see the distance that actually is. I think that's just outside the sort of goal frame and whatever, 4 yards out. And Ramsdale's managed to get from his line to right in front of the ball in whatever a split second.
Yeah,
and literally completely spreads, and it basically means Curtis Jones could have smashed that down the middle, he'd have saved it. He could have tried to curl it near post, his foot would have got it, other post, his other foot would have got it. Tries to go high, his shoulders and his arms are getting there. It's basically just a perfect spread technique that just covers the whole of the available goal. And again, this goes back to the bravery comment I think we made. Like, Ramsdale's really not afraid of just getting his body smashed, something that I think actually isn't all that common in modern goalkeepers.
The next one is also a spread, but this was against Wolves, slightly different. You can see him flying in that second image. Talk us through what's happening here.
Yeah, again, it's just really tidy. Like, there's a little bit of a twist here, which is not perfect technique, but it's basically, again, just the ball's falling 1v1 close range, and there's not actually many better than Ramsdale, at least last year, at doing this. Just the speed of thought to get off the line that quickly, speed of body to actually do it, and then to use the spread technique. So like I was saying before, my model found that if you try and use a different shape, so if you like try and dive on the ball and smother it, or if you try and drop into that cricket long barrier block thing, you end up conceding more often in situations like this because you just don't fill enough of the goal. The spread's really useful here because, like, the striker, really, no matter where they go, it's possible that you could get something on it. Whereas if you like picked one side and dived, if they like we saw with Donnarumma actually against Morata in the Euros in the semi, like he picked away and dived when he came out 1v1, and Morata just rolled it near post, and you can never save that. Whereas with a spread, because you go to both sides with both your legs, like the near post isn't as exposed, but also the far post, you can still get something on it. So I think just the fact Ramsdale's so proficient at executing this technique's like wonderful, and why he saves so many close range 1v1s. Making the correct decision is often better than having the perfect technique. So if you're making the right decision more often than not, you'll do fine.
You're convincing me, I have to tell you. Let's have a look at a couple of goals that he's conceded. So this is a goal that he conceded against Leeds. Talk us through what's happening here in terms of their build-up.
Yeah, so I believe it's potentially Harrison or someone like that dribbling through for Leeds. And this is the one area he's a little bit weak with on close range 1v1s. I say weak, he's saved 4 more goals than he'd be expected to. But But an area he could go even higher is sometimes on wide 1v1s, he doesn't engage. So here you can see Harrison, I think, for Leeds, dribbles through, gets really close to goal. So like he's well within the 6-yard box there. And Ramsdale just stays and holds his position. He backs himself that he won't be beaten. And potentially he won't. It will be a hard finish to sort of curl it in or smash it through him there. But the problem is, for close range 1v1s here, my model realizes that actually they're really easy to just square across goals and tapping's going to happen, which is what happens. So actually my model's like, you really need to engage. If that was slightly further inside, I have no hesitation that he'd come flying out and spread. He always does. Yeah. It's just these little wide ones that he sometimes is a bit reluctant. And I guess it's because he thinks, oh, I'm in my goal, the arrows tight, beat me, which isn't a bad thing to think. But once they get to a certain point, they get so close to goal that it's just a simple square and finish. So you have to engage it at some point.
Gotcha. If we look at the goal that he conceded against Manchester United next, this is slightly different. Obviously, it's coming straight through the middle. Talk us through what's happening here with Rashford.
Yeah. So I think this is highlighting what we were discussing earlier with he does have a little bit of an issue with long-range 1v1s, and it sort of stems from two places. And this is the first place. This is similar to the Kane thing as well, although the Kane goal wasn't actually a 1v1. But the balls come over the top, and Ramsdale sort of looks like he's going to start backing off in that first slide. But then he stops, and he stops 7 yards out. And that means Rashford actually shoots first time. Potentially, this wouldn't have even become a 1v1. If Ramsdale wasn't stood there, you think Rashford might have cut back and let the Sheffield United defender get back, or he might have taken a touch and made it a 1v1. But by Ramsdale starting there, Rashford thinks, oh, I can have a pop here. Second time, actually, he takes a touch and then shoots. And the shot goes straight down the middle and hits like chest height straight down the middle of the goal. But because Ramsdale's there and quite low, it just whizzes past him. He's effectively turned an 18-yard shot by standing 7 yards out, into a shot that's closer than a penalty in terms of reaction time. It's 11 yards to him. So that's why a shot can just whiz past his shoulder and he has no time to react. So it's one of those where he has to notice here that there's a defender tracking. It's going to be a 1v1, but if it's a heavy touch, he can still get out to it. But if it's a good touch, he's dead. So he has to realize here, no, drop back and wait and react, rather than doing this, I'm going to hold my position and do what I call engage and react, which is like, I'm just going to hold my position and then react to whatever happens. Yeah. My model finds that that's a really bad strategy. And actually, you never want to hold your position and react to what happens. You either want to rush off your line and engage the ball, or you want to drop right off and wait and read the situation. So yeah, here it's one of those where he's got a player tracking back. He really could have used those extra few sub-seconds to drop back onto his line. And I often see really good goalkeepers doing that. And I love to praise it on Twitter because it often never gets brought up. But if he'd have used that extra half second he had when Rashford was watching the ball onto his foot and taking a touch to back off into his 6-yard box, that could have probably been a catch. Or more often than not, actually, Rashford wouldn't have even shot. He'd have looked up, seen the goalkeeper was on his line, taken a touch, probably lost it. It's football. Goalkeepers often make finishes out of nothing and stop finishes out of nothing. It's really kind of a weird skill.
Last couple of slides. So this goal he conceded against Gareth Bale of Spurs. Talk us through this one.
Yep. So this is basically a carbon copy of that last one. So he starts really high, Bale's running through. This is quite like the Martinelli one, actually. This is the probably closest thing we can get to it, with him running through. There's defenders trying to get back, but nowhere near. You can see he drops right off into his 6-yard box, does it really well, perfect. And then at the last second, gambles, jumps forwards out of his 6-yard box and just picks away and dives, and Bale just smashes it in. Like, he did the correct thing. He did really well. Like, if I was his coach, I'd be absolutely buzzing that in that moment, like, Bale's running through for a long time and he manages to get back in his 6-yard box. That takes real bravery, and he did it really well. But then at the last second, he relinquished it all by just diving to that side. It's just like, if you'd have stayed and then conceded because he can't get across to the other side quick enough and it's a worldy goal, I'm loving it. I'm like, that's great goalkeeping. You made that so hard for Bale, and Bale's a world-class player and he did it. Bale's a seasoned pro. In the Premier League, you're going to be playing against seasoned pros who are looking to con the goalkeeper. So if you give them any chance, they're just going to slip it to the other side if they see you moving early. So it's one of those things. If he wants to get to like the top level, like playing for Arsenal style level, that's a little thing he's going to have to remove from his game, because the top goalkeepers don't gamble on people's body language or movement, at least not to this extent.
Sure. The last one is a save that he made against Southampton. Why have you picked this one out?
Yeah, so this is like a sort of signal of hope I have for Ramsdale being able to make saves like this, because sometimes I watch a goalkeeper and I'm like, no, he's always going to make the wrong decision, and he's going to save them when the striker messes up, but he's never going to sort of save them when the striker does the correct thing. But here, I have hope that Ramsdale can really improve this long-range 1v1 shot stopping, because here Che Adams is running in for a long time. The camera angle here is not the best, but there's one Sheffield United defender trying to cover, but he's never actually going to get across. And you see in the end, he doesn't get across in time. Che Adams is just running in long-range 1v1. And you can see now Ramsdale just stays in his 6-yard box. He doesn't come out. He doesn't try and do anything. And he doesn't, importantly, you can't really tell, but he doesn't preemptively dive. So the save he makes Che Adams smash it, which is good. Which you can imagine if he rushes out there. And I remember a goal where Pickford rushes out here for Everton, and he just got chipped. And there was one where Pickford rushed out in a similar location. He just got megged with a side foot finish. And it's one of those where rushing out here, you suddenly give the striker the chip and the side foot, which strikers love. It's what they practice every day. It's the sort of finish they really like doing. But if you don't rush out, the striker has to smash it. And that's much harder. It's much easier to go wide of the post. It's much easier to go over the bar. It's the thing they don't want to do. And Che Adams smashes it here, gets it quite well across Ramsdale, but Ramsdale just sticks out a right foot and saves it wonderfully. And it wasn't off his shin pad or anything. He hadn't preemptively dived here. He literally just stayed big, stayed up. Oh, you've shot there, bang, stick a leg out, big save. So this gives me a lot of hope that Ramsdale actually does sort of know what he should do. And I look forward to watching him next season, wherever he is, to see if he can sort of keep this up and keep that performance going.
I have to say, John, I'm new to this YouTube game. I've done a few videos on players, and I wasn't expecting to be as interesting as it has been. So I want to bring the feature to a close by just sort of summarizing on Ramsdale. So look, he's young. There's a lot of development in his game. Goalkeepers, of course, don't peak until much further in their careers. Parts of his game that you're really excited about. A couple of areas for him to sort of improve. The 20, 30, 40 million pounds fee, depending on what report you read, is probably not the end of the world given his age profile. And, if it doesn't work out in 4 or 5 years' time, he'll still have some sort of sell-on value, the English sort of premium. Is he, in your opinion, someone that Arsenal should go for? And if we were to get him, do you think he can be Arsenal number one and maybe even one of the world's elite goalkeepers in time?
So I think for the right price that won't financially stop Arsenal making other big signings, I think definitely. And I think he'd be a really solid number 2 for right now and potentially could be a number 1 for the future. But if Arsenal are totting up like Ramsdale or like Onana or like a sort of more marquee goalkeeper signing, if they can get the more marquee, I'd go for that. I wouldn't necessarily try and go for the English premium Ramsdale as like a number 2 to start with. And then once Leno's older, bring him in to be number 1. I think he could do that, but I think it's a gamble because like we've been talking about today, there is a few flaws there. He's not the finished article yet. And also he's never played for a top 6 club. It is a difference. Like Ben Foster always says this when you go on his YouTube, like he couldn't be the level of goalkeeper he is for Watford for Man United. Like the mental strain, he just found it too hard. And that's fair enough. And that can happen to players. So because Ramsdale hasn't done it at that level, I would be a little bit worried he couldn't perfectly replicate some of his best moments. I think he'd be a great number 2, and if that's what Arsenal are signing him for, I'd go for that. If the money's right for the sort of number 2 goalkeeper / someone who's taking up one of your homegrown slots.
Fantastic. For those of you guys who are watching, obviously drop a like and a subscribe and all that sort of stuff. But more importantly, tell me, is Aaron Ramsdale the sort of goalkeeper that you want Arsenal to pursue? You've seen all the evidence, you've seen all the charts. There's some amazing data from John. So let us know in the comments below and I'll reply back to each and every one of you. John, may I thank you for your insight and your time. It's been fascinating, really. So I really appreciate that. And hopefully, you can come back on later in the season at some point. So thank you very, very much for today.